welcome back to the second episode of Battlefield Dev Talks, the show where we as developers discuss the feedback that has been coming up the past couple of weeks. My name is Nathalie, I'm a UX designer on the Battlefield franchise, and with me I have Daniel, who is our franchise design director, and we have David, who is our multiplayer producer. Last week we wrapped up the open beta for Battlefield 5, and we have got some feedback, to say the least. And we're going to actually talk a little bit about it today.
Yep.
And we have chosen a couple of areas that we want to talk about. And we're going to start off with attrition. And we also have visibility, the death experience, time to kill and time to death, as well as vehicle play.
Yeah.
So I just think that we're going to get straight into it. And we're going to start with attrition. And this is an area that is very polarizing when it comes to feedback. Either you hate it or you absolutely love it. So it's quite hard to know where we're landing when it comes to tweaking. But I'm just gonna let you guys talk a little bit about the actual changes that we are doing due to the feedback that we got from the beta.
Yeah, I'll start. I think.
Yeah, you go, man.
I think the biggest thing here is that we got a lot of players playing the beta. Got a lot of data, got a lot of feedback, got a lot of polls, we got a lot of everything.
Yes.
But the key thing is not to overreact, right? So we want to make sure that what we do is small nudges in the right direction to tighten things, improve things, make it flow better, right?
Yeah.
And with attrition, there's some key changes here. And they are?
Well, so the key changes that we're making now with the feedback coming in, and I think it's really interesting because Jack Frags actually posted a survey.
Yeah.
And I think the survey, I don't have the numbers, but I think it was roughly 25% said they hate it, and about 30% say they love it, and then 45 to 50% say tweak it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty clear message to us that we're onto something here, and we should tweak it.
Yeah, people kind of like it, but it has.
I think it's about it's a system that's going to be with us through this entire journey, and I mean we get feedback now, so without making any knee-jerk reactions, we are tweaking it for the better, I'd say. We're not going to go into any details in terms of like, oh, it's going to be this and that value, but in general, I'd say that the direction we're going with attrition right now towards launch is that certain weapons, not all weapons. Will have a more starting ammunition on spawn. We'll also have more ammo capacity, meaning maximum ammo you can carry. And we're also looking into having every soldier spawn with the pouch, the self-heal. But that's only a one-time use. So once you've used it once, you gotta get a new one from a medic or picking up from a resupply station.
Yeah, and speaking of the resupply stations, we're changing how they are pre-built on the map. Keeping in tone with giving out a med pack to everyone. That means you don't need as many, or at least you need to do that as an active choice.
Yeah.
And so we keep the pre-built ones to the HQs and the adjacent objectives, and everything else is probably not built. But that means you can go in and build it and actually get good points kickback from people using it.
Yeah.
We didn't really see that a lot in the beta because not everyone understood you could rebuild these.
They were always there from the beginning,
Yeah.
But the kind of like what we want to see is we want to see those those classical BF initial start rushes. In the beginning, when Conquest Match, everyone just rushes forward and starts capturing points, and within that flow, I think people will start to also learn that like, hey, when we reach past the first flag and come to the second flag, this is where you actually need to start building resupply stations to kind of cement your ownership of the base and everything like that. So it's gonna be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just as important as destruction will be building. Shape and reshape the battlefield with a new fortification system. Every soldier is equipped with a toolbox and can build fortifications in specific areas. Dig foxholes, lay down sandbags, build bridges, barbed wire, tank stoppers, and more. Reinforce buildings that have been destroyed, create choke points to gain the advantage, even open up new routes to flank opponents.
The tanks felt heavy, too heavy, not agile enough, or not offensive enough against infantry. But I think what a lot of people didn't know is that we had a whole other class, or a few other classes of vehicles that weren't in the open beta that sort of cover that area of the spectrum. The light tanks, and the anti-aircraft vehicles.
Because people thought we were actually having light tanks in the open beta.
Yeah, those weren't light; those were medium tanks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think it's important to know that the lineup that we have planned for launch is actually way bigger than what people saw in the open beta. So the experiences that we tried to provide in the open beta were exactly the heavy tank and the medium tank. But we have so many other experiences lined up that I think people will be very excited to try out.
Yeah.
The open beta was also the first proving ground for one of the new features we're actually adding to the franchise, which is the slow turret speed.
Yeah.
So I think this is a franchise first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where we actually try to make the turret speed of the tank matter in terms of gameplay. And what we saw in the open beta was probably what we want the turret speed for heavy tanks to be. But we've taken steps to make the medium tank have a very a much faster turret, and the classes that we haven't seen in open beta, the light tanks, they will have a very fast turret speed.
Speaking of that, we're gonna go through the balance of the vehicles. And can you just explain a little bit about how we are working when we're trying to find a balance for the vehicles and what differs from beta and what we will look in towards launch?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, a big answer to that is actually completing the lineup. We want tanks to be, the tanks are the dragons of our game. Once they show up on the field, everyone should relate to that. If you're seeing a friendly tank, you should try to push alongside the tank. If you're an enemy of the tank, you should cower in fear, basically.
Yeah, like I always do.
Yes. And then with the different classes, that is true more or less. I mean, the heavy tanks are supposed to be like dominating features on the battlefield. The light tanks are supposed to be like small annoying harassers that outflank and stuff like that.
We've talked about using the weight of the class as one of the elements we use to balance. So if it's a heavy tank, you're tough to take down, but you're less agile and less offensive towards targets like infantry. But you're better at taking out other vehicles. The light tanks have less weight, so they're more agile, and they have more accurate and more reactive, or more ability to react with their weapons, and they're better against smaller targets like infantry.
Yeah, heavy tanks have to rely on their toughness to get out of a sticky situation. Light tanks have to rely on their speed and maneuverability to get out of sticky situations.
Yeah. So even though our tanks are beasts sometimes, you can actually destroy them, and we have something called systemic damage, which we have had previous titles, but we have upped our game in this area, right? Would you like to just explain a little bit about what we're actually adding?
Yeah, sure. So we've had systemic damage in the game on vehicles in one way or another since I think BF3 was the first time we introduced sort of a mobility kill or a disabled state where you couldn't drive. I think the purpose there was to have an element of the vehicle gameplay that could be affected by soldiers or other anti-tank weapons that wasn't destroying the vehicle outright, but sort of like chipping away or helping infantry feel like they can affect the vehicle, even though they're not destroying it outright. I think we've done a good job in Battlefield 5 in tweaking this in this iteration. If you compare to BF1, we had like you could become immobile, you could destroy weapons on the vehicle so they couldn't be used. But sometimes that left you feeling sort of dead in the water, or it felt pointless to, you're just getting attacked more and you can't move or you can't shoot back. So instead what we're doing is we're toning down the effects of this so that they are, they change your decisions as a tank player, but they don't leave you feeling like you're stuck or that you have no choices.
And it's also worth noting that in open beta we actually only had the track damage enabled, but we have turret damage that slows down your turret if it gets damaged enough, and we have engine damage. So if you're an infantryman and you manage to sneak up on a tank, there's a high likelihood that you can actually cripple its movement.
And adding the turret feature will actually make it possible to sneak up on them.
Yes.
So that would be
Exactly.
very interesting. I can just see a lot of Battlefield moments with this one.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting. The last thing I want to talk about is definitely not my area, and that is airplanes. I never ever spawn in as a pilot because I just don't know how to handle it. So I'm
It's
just
not
gonna,
that complicated.
I can't do it. So I'm just gonna let you guys talk a little bit about the airplanes, and I'm just gonna sit here and listen and learn, hopefully. Just explain a little bit what's happening towards launch and what we are aiming for when it comes to airplanes and the way they play.
We can talk about what I heard, at least from feedback from the beta. I think I heard that the difference between the two fighter planes was too great, and that people didn't like. I think overall, some people thought that the handling wasn't agile enough on the fighter planes. There are issues about not being able to acquire ground targets as easily as they thought they could in previous titles, maybe due to the changes in spotting throughout the whole game. So that's what I heard in response to the open beta airplane experience.
Yes. And that, I think to sort of build on that, I think the plane we had in open beta that we were the most happy with was probably the BF 109, but even that one wasn't necessarily where we needed it to be. Yeah. So right now we're taking steps to make the two fighter planes way more similar and also better than they were in the open beta. We also did stuff to visibility for pilots and gunners in planes. We extended the spotting range.
Because now you can actually see people.
Precisely, which is kind of the point of spotting. And that should also help a lot in terms of planes acquiring targets on the ground.